So I believe the spread of misinformation, disinformation of our ways of being within our community, our stories that are being shared. There's a extreme push right now to be telling our stories, but at the same time, I think that we have to be ever so careful of how we're telling them, who's telling them. The rise of pretendianism. So that's, of course, people that are pretending to be Indigenous that aren't. And so, say for instance, that falls into the hands of somebody that's not Indigenous, that's coming off as, you know, this is my story, and it isn't. That really hurts the broader community, and it hurts because, and hurting meaning that it's maybe being told in a way that's not accurate and factual, and it's really important when you're telling these stories that we are being factual about what's occurred, maybe in the historical, you know, not so much records, because we're an oral, you know, storytelling community, and so getting these things right the first time when you're told, and that's why listening is super important. Myths and stereotypes have begun in the very first upstart of, you know, when settlers first arrived. I believe that it still occurs to this day. I believe that there is for sure a sort of a two cultures that haven't still seen their Indigenous worldview, our Indigenous worldview, I should say, and people that have come from all over the place that live in Canada. And so I think that it's really important that people take the opportunity, if they have, to go to Indigenous events where there's actual real people that are originally from Turtle Island, and that of course includes Canada, the US, and Mexico. And so the stereotypes, when I was working in television news in the late 90s, you know, I had a news director that had told me, I know your people, I've been to a powwow, you know, or I would always be pitching stories to go out and tell stories within Treaty 7, which is in this territory here of Calgary in southern Alberta. And I'd be told, why would Canadians even care about what's going on in your community? Why would we even give resources, you know, like a camera operator and, you know, a TV vehicle to go out and go get that story? You know, who cares, really? So that to me has changed since then, and I'm very happy because that type of attitude essentially has come full circle, and we've come to this place where we have CBC Indigenous, we have the Aboriginal People's Television Network, we are being celebrated at TIFF this year, the Toronto International Film Festival, we have the Indigenous Screen Office. There's many resources for Indigenous people to tell their stories. Indigenous storytellers can combat some of the misinformation is to include that they tell where this story came from. So for instance, you know, I told the spirit and intent of Treaty 7, and this was back when I worked on the Sharing Circle in the late 90s, and I sat down with Wilton Goodstriker, who's now an elder from the Blood Tribe. And I believe that, you know, sitting with your sources and absolutely giving them that credit is super important. I think that, you know, when we're given these stories, it's an exchange of energy. That's why you give tobacco. Those are our protocols of not just taking, but also giving. So there's an exchange of energy. And so when you're gifted those stories, it's essentially a part of how you in the future are going to be telling them to the next generation, and even to, in this situation, an educational institution.